The year is 1470. In the mountains of Thessaly, a bell rings one final time across a valley that will never hear it again. Inside the convent of St. Catherine, 23 women kneel in prayer. Their lips move in unison, forming words they've spoken every morning for years. The Byzantine liturgical tradition demands that the canonical hours be celebrated throughout the day. Vespers at sunset, matins at sunrise, the divine liturgy that can last 8 hours in Great Lent. But this morning, the words taste different, like ash, like goodbye. Outside the stone walls, the horizon bleeds red, not from sunrise, but from the banners of an empire that has already swallowed kingdoms whole. The Ottoman army doesn't march, it flows like a river of steel and fire, erasing everything in its path. Sister Eleni, the abbess, clutches a silver crucifix that has survived 3 generations. Her hands tremble, but not from fear. She knows what's coming. They all do. What they don't know, what no one could imagine, is that death would have been a mercy. Because what happened next wasn't written in any history book you studied in school. It was buried, erased, hidden beneath centuries of silence. Until now.
To understand what happened to these nuns, you need to understand the collision of 2 worlds, 2 completely incompatible systems of thought, power, and existence. The world of the convent. In Byzantine monasticism, the day is structured around 8 hours of liturgical prayer. These women wake before dawn, they gather in the chapel. The liturgy is divided into 2 parts. The liturgy of the Word, where the gospel is carried from altar to nave, and the Eucharist, where bread and wine are transformed. Their world is vertical. Everything rises upward, prayers to God, incense to heaven, bells to the sky. Monks and nuns spend their time in worship, manuscript copying, icon painting, and producing sacred objects. Time is measured in prayer cycles, not productivity. Success is measured in spiritual depth, not territorial gain. A monk's cell is small, a bed carved into rock, a straw mat, a single wool tunic. Poverty is not punishment, it's liberation. When you own nothing, nothing owns you. This is their fortress: simplicity, prayer, memory. They preserve texts that go back 1,000 years. They copy manuscripts by candlelight. They sing hymns in Greek and Latin that their grandmothers sang. They are living vessels of continuity in a world that keeps forgetting. The world of the empire. 17 years earlier, in 1453, Constantinople fell, the jewel of Christendom. The city that had stood for over 1,000 years, gone in 53 days of cannon fire and blood. But here's what most people don't understand. The Ottomans didn't just want the city, they wanted to rewrite reality itself. By the 15th century, the Ottoman state had developed far more extensive administrative power than simple tribal organizations. This wasn't a horde of raiders, this was a machine. The Ottoman bureaucracy was highly centralized, with low-level bureaucrats consisting primarily of secretaries who drew up documents and officials who kept financial records, most of which still exist and are carefully filed away. Everything was recorded, everything was cataloged. The Ottomans conducted tahir, or land surveys, executed regularly to keep up-to-date accounts of economic, security, and taxation data of the population. Their world is horizontal. Everything spreads outward. Armies across continents, taxes from every village, records in every province. Time is measured in campaigns and harvests. Success is measured in submission. The Ottoman society was divided between a small ruling class of Ottomans and a large mass of subjects called rayas. 3 attributes were essential for membership in the ruling class: profession of loyalty to the Sultan, acceptance of Islam, and knowledge of the complicated system of Ottoman customs and language. This is their fortress: organization, documentation, control. When they conquer a region, scribes arrive before the soldiers have even left. They count heads, they measure land, they record who owns what, they establish tax rates, they create files. The Ottomans understand something profound. You don't defeat people by killing them. You defeat them by making them forget who they were.
By 1470, the Ottoman strategy for dealing with Christian religious communities had been perfected across the empire. This wasn't random violence. This was policy. The pattern was always the same. First, the offer. Convert to Islam and your life continues. You keep your property. You join the ruling class. Your children can rise in the empire. The Ottoman system allowed Christians to convert and gain full status in the empire. Second, the alternative. If you refuse, you don't get executed. That would create martyrs. Martyrs inspire resistance. Songs are written, stories are told, the dead become immortal. No, if you refuse, you disappear. But not through death, through something far more calculated. You are removed from your community, separated from your identity, stripped of your name. You become a ghost, walking, breathing, eating, but no longer yourself. You serve the empire in silence. You work in obscurity. You exist, but you do not live. And here's the brilliance of it. When you erase someone without killing them, there's no one left to tell the story, no braves to visit, no martyrs to remember, just empty buildings and people who stop asking questions. This is what's coming for the 23 women of St. Catherine's Convent. Not an army, a system, a machine designed to make people vanish without leaving a trace. Sister Eleni, kneeling in prayer, hears the first cannonball strike the bell tower. The sound is apocalyptic. Stone explodes into the air. Iron shrieks against iron. The bell that has rung every morning for 140 years shatters mid-swing, and the pieces rain down onto the courtyard where the sisters grow herbs for healing. The same hands that tended those plants now cover their ears, trembling. But Sister Eleni doesn't scream. She stands, crucifix raised high, and begins to sing, the Kyrie eleison, Lord have mercy, repeated over 100 times during the Divine Liturgy. One by one the others join her, 23 voices rising against the roar of an empire. But empires don't listen to songs. By midday, the gates are breached. Ottoman soldiers pour into the courtyard, but not with swords drawn, with ledgers, quills, inkpots. They move through the convent like clerks, not conquerors, counting, recording, cataloging. Because to the Ottomans, these women aren't people, they're assets. This is the collision point. Watch it carefully. In Byzantine worship, the altar is separated from the congregation by a templon, a screen that divides the sacred space from the profane. The priest carries the gospel book in solemn procession. The bread and wine are prepared in a side chapel, then brought to the altar with incense and liturgical fans shaped like six-winged creatures. Every movement has meaning, every gesture points upward. But the Ottoman soldiers see none of this. They see square footage, they see grain stores, they see taxable land. They see women who could be converted, relocated, deployed. Ottoman subjects were expected to comply with orders and requests from bureaucrats. If not, security forces were called in. A translator steps forward, a Greek man who once lived in these hills. His voice shakes as he reads from a scroll. You can hear the shame buried in every word. By order of Sultan Mehmed II, all subjects of conquered territories must submit to the authority of the Sublime Porte. Those who convert to Islam will be granted protection, property rights, and citizenship. Those who refuse will face the consequences of rebellion. Sister Eleni steps forward. Her face is calm, almost serene. She speaks not to the soldiers,
but to the translator, in Greek so clear that everyone understands. Tell your sultan that we have already given our lives to a king. We have nothing left to surrender. The officer in charge, a man named Hassan Pasha, whose name appears in Ottoman military records from the 1470 Thessalian campaign, doesn't respond with anger. He responds with something far more chilling: a smile. Because he knows something the nuns don't yet understand. The Ottomans have perfected the art of breaking people without killing them. That night, the women are locked inside their own chapel. No food, no water, just darkness and the sound of soldiers outside, laughing, eating, living, while they wait to see who breaks first. This is psychological warfare, Ottoman style. In a typical Byzantine monastery, worship involves daily liturgy and weekly Eucharist. Monks share a ritual meal after services, a midday meal and light evening meal. Missing a meal requires special permission, but now there are no meals, no services, no routine, just waiting. Two younger sisters begin to weep in the corner. Their sobs echo off the stone walls. But Sister Magdalena, barely 20 years old, who took her vows only 2 years before, begins to whisper a psalm. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." Then another. "Though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Then another. And slowly the weeping stops. This is the moment the Ottomans underestimated. These women had spent their entire lives preparing for suffering. Fasting, vigils in the cold, hours of silence, submission to something greater than themselves. What the soldiers saw as torture, the nuns saw as their daily discipline. On the second day, the doors open. A servant enters with bread and water. Real food, clean water. He sets it down without a word and leaves. The nuns stare at it. Their throats are dry, their stomachs hollow. The younger sisters look to Eleni, desperation in their eyes. Sister Theodorus, the eldest, at 70 years old, speaks first. They want us to take it, to feel gratitude, to soften. Eleni nods. Then we fast. They don't touch the food. Byzantine fasting laws are stricter than in the West. The faithful give up not only meat, but also dairy products, and on many fast days, fish, wine, and the use of oil in cooking. By the third day, their lips are cracked and bleeding. Their hands shake. The younger sisters can barely stand, but they don't break. Hassan Pasha watches from the courtyard, arms crossed. He's impressed, frustrated, and perhaps, for just a moment, something close to respect flickers across his face. But respect doesn't change strategy. On the third day, the doors open again. This time, it's Hassan himself. He speaks in Turkish, the translator following behind like a shadow. "You are not criminals. You are not enemies. You are simply mistaken. The Sultan is merciful. He offers you new lives, new names, protection. All you must do is speak the words." Silence. "Or you can come with us to Constantinople. The Sultan himself will hear your case. Perhaps he will be moved by your conviction." He pauses, lets the words settle. But the road is long, and the weak do not survive it. It's not a threat, it's a fact. Sister Eleni looks at her sisters. Some are barely conscious, some are playing with their eyes closed, some are staring at the floor, trying to find strength in stone. She turns back to Hassan. "We will walk." The smile returns to his face. "Good. We leave at dawn."
They leave at dawn on the fourth day. 23 women, hands bound with rope, walking south toward the coast. No carts, no horses, just their feet and the dust and the sun that shows no mercy. Ottoman military organization relied on the Timar system. Conquered lands assigned to military commanders who collected taxes and provided soldiers.
But this isn't a military campaign. This is an administrative relocation. The soldiers don't rush them. They don't need to. The road itself is the weapon. This is the most brutal form of the Ottoman ghosting strategy. Physical removal from the landscape of memory. Byzantine monastic life was centered on fixed locations: the Catholicon, main church, the refectory, the cells carved into rock. Identity was tied to place, to routine, to the rhythm of bells marking prayer times. Now there are no bells, no chapel, no cells, just endless walking. By the second day, Sister Irene collapses. She's 62. Her knees have been failing for years. She tries to stand, but her legs won't hold her. The soldiers don't wait. Sister Magdalena and another nun lift her between them and carry her for the next 3 miles. When they finally stop for the night, Irene is unconscious. By morning, she's gone. They bury her by the roadside with their hands. No tools, no ceremony, just dirt and whispered prayers. The soldiers watch. They don't stop them. Hassan Pasha makes a note in his ledger. Ottoman bureaucrats kept meticulous financial records, most of which still exist. 22 remaining. On the 4th day, it happens again. Sister Callista, who hasn't spoken since the siege, simply stops walking. She sits down in the middle of the road, closes her eyes, and doesn't get up. They leave her there. On the 6th day, Sister Anna. On the 8th day, Sister Maria. By the time they reach the port of Volos 7 days later, only 18 remain. But something happened on that road, something the Ottomans didn't anticipate. The nuns stopped weeping, stopped begging. They walked in silence, but it wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of women who had already made their choice.
On the morning of the 7th day, Hassan Pasha calls for Sister Eleni. She is brought to his tent alone. What happens next isn't described in Ottoman records. It's described in a letter from a Venetian merchant who witnessed the aftermath. A letter discovered in 2003 in the archives of Dubrovnik. He writes, "I saw them bring her back at dawn. She could not walk. Her eyes, God forgive me, her eyes were open, but she was not inside them anymore. They dressed her in silk and paraded her through the camp as a convert, but when I passed close, I heard her lips moving. She was still praying in Latin, silently. She had not broken. They had simply taken her body and left her soul to wander." This is the Ottoman strategy that history doesn't teach you. They didn't want martyrs. Martyrs inspire resistance. Songs are written, stories are told, the dead become saints. They wanted ghosts. Women who would walk, talk, eat, breathe, but would never be whole again. Living proof that rebellion was futile. Living warnings to anyone who thought faith could stand against empire. Sister Eleni walked with them the rest of the way to the coast, but she never spoke again, never looked anyone in the eye. She was there, but she wasn't. The younger sisters wept when they saw her. The older ones just prayed harder. This is the moment where the two worlds collide most violently. In Byzantine liturgy, the transformation of bread and wine into Christ's body and blood is the supreme mystery, the moment when heaven touches earth. The sacred cannot be violated. The soul cannot be conquered. But the Ottoman system doesn't recognize a distinction between body and soul, sacred and profane. Power in Ottoman society was based on loyalty to the Sultan, acceptance of Islam, and knowledge of Ottoman customs. The individual exists only as part of the system. Sister Eleni's violation is the physical manifestation of this collision. Her body has been absorbed into Ottoman administrative reality,
but her soul remains in Byzantine sacred space. She is split in two, a ghost, and this is exactly what the Ottomans intended. At the port of Volos, they're loaded onto a galley, a massive warship with rows of benches and chains bolted to the wood. This is not a passenger ship. This is a vessel designed for control. The nuns are chained to the benches, wrists locked to iron rings. A ship's manifest discovered in 1987 in Istanbul's Topkapi Palace Museum lists them not by name, but by category. Religious captives, female, 18. Destination, imperial household, purpose, domestic service, and conversion. That word service is doing a lot of work. The voyage lasts 12 days. The sea is not kind. Storms lash the deck. Salt spray stings their cracked lips. At night, the youngest, Sister Magdalena, whispers psalms beneath her breath. Her voice is faint, barely audible over the crashing waves. But the other prisoners, Greeks, Serbs, Italians, men and women chained beside them, turn their heads to listen. For a moment, the sea seems to still. When the ship finally enters the Bosporus, the sisters see the skyline of Constantinople rise before them. Domes, minarets, walls that seem to stretch forever. The city gleams in the dawn light like a blade. For centuries, it had been called the city of the world's desire. Now it would become their cage. From the docks, they're marched through narrow streets. People stop to stare. Christian nuns among the captives are unusual, even in an empire built on conquest. They're led past the ancient walls, through the imperial district, past gardens where fountains sing and peacocks scream, and then, in the shadow of the Hagia Sophia, the great church that is now a mosque, they're forced to stop, to kneel. As the call to prayer echoes from the minarets, one of the sisters whispers, "We are home," but it is no longer ours. The imperial council met in the Topkapi Palace in a dedicated building in the second courtyard. But the nuns aren't taken to the grand halls, not to the courtyards where ambassadors walk and viziers conspire. They're taken beneath, down stone steps that spiral into darkness, through tunnels that smell of damp and decay, to a place that doesn't officially exist. For the next several years, these 18 women become invisible. Low-level Ottoman bureaucrats consisted primarily of secretaries and officials who kept financial records. The women work as servants in the palace, scrubbing floors, washing linens, tending fires for rooms they'll never enter. They are ghosts moving through the empire's heart. During the day, they're silent. They keep their heads down. They do their work. They survive. But at night, something different happens. In the farthest corner of the palace's lower levels, there's a room that's been sealed off, an old storage chamber, abandoned decades ago. The door is blocked, the entrance hidden behind false stonework. Officially, it doesn't exist. But the women find it, because when you're looking for a place to hide, you notice things other people don't. They start gathering there after the palace sleeps. They have no priest, no altar, no Bible, just memory. The Byzantine liturgical cycle includes the canonical hours, Vespers, Compline, Midnight Office, Matins, First Hour, Third Hour, Sixth Hour, Ninth Hour. The nuns recite what they remember from years of daily practice. They whisper psalms from recall, verses they learned as children, now half forgotten, reshaped into prayers that keep them alive. They sing hymns so faint the stone barely catches them. They hold communion with bread stolen from the kitchens and water from the palace wells. And they carve their faith into the walls, one scratch at a time, with broken pottery, with shards of metal, with their fingernails when they have nothing else. Hundreds of tiny crosses, covering every inch of wall they can reach. Sister Magdalena becomes their voice in that darkness. The girl who whispered psalms on the ship, who carried Sister Irene on the road, who refused to look away when they brought Sister Eleni back in silk. They used broken pottery for candle holders, a scrap of linen for an altar cloth. From a fragment of shattered mirror, they fashioned a crude cross. Byzantine monks produced manuscripts, icons, and liturgical objects as sacred activity performed with devotion. But now there are no manuscripts, no icons, just scratches in stone. Each night they gather. No hymns, no sermons, just memories. Each woman kneels and shares something from before: her home, her church bell, the smell of bread baking, the sound of rain on her village's roof. These memories become their new scripture, small offerings to a God who still listens in the dark. This hidden chapel represents the ultimate failure of the Ottoman ghosting strategy. The system was designed to erase identity, to separate people from community, from ritual, from memory itself. But in absolute darkness, beneath the very seat of Ottoman power, these women recreated their world. Not the physical world, that was gone, but the vertical world, the world of prayer and meaning and continuity.
Here's where the story gets hard to tell. Not because of what happened, but because of what didn't. The cross is on the wall. They stop. Halfway through, the carvings become erratic, desperate. The lines deepen as if someone was pressing harder, running out of time. Then, nothing. Ottoman records from 1482 mention a cleansing of the palace staff under the new sultan. Anyone deemed unproductive or resistant was removed. No details, no names, no burial sites. Just one line in a ledger: disposed. Ottoman financial records were meticulously kept, and most still exist. But this particular detail is brief, bureaucratic, final. 18 women who walked 7 days through hell, who crossed the sea in chains, who carved prayers into stone in absolute darkness. Gone. But here's the thing about erasure: it's never complete. A French diplomat in 1712 wrote about a rumor among the older palace servants. They said that on certain nights, if you stood in the lower halls, the air would grow cold, and if you listened closely, you could hear women singing in Latin. He dismissed it as superstition. But the walls don't lie. In 2011, during restoration work beneath Topkapi Palace, archaeologists broke through a false wall. What they found stopped them cold. Scratched into the stone, barely visible crosses. Dozens of them, hundreds, small, crude, carved with fingernails or shards of broken pottery. And beneath those crosses, etched in Latin, 4 words: Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. From the Gospel of John, a verse about light that cannot be extinguished. The archaeologists found traces of wax, not from Ottoman candles, but older, mixed with herbs, the kind of candles nuns made in convents. Which means they kept their vigil for years, maybe decades, carving crosses, whispering prayers, refusing to disappear. Sister Magdalena's bird was the last mark on the wall, a small bird scratched into the corner. Beside it, 18 lines, 1 for each woman, but only 11 were complete. The rest trailed off into nothing. And beneath the bird, scratched so faintly it was almost invisible, 2 words in Greek: we endure. The Ottoman Empire lasted 600 years. They conquered 3 continents. They rewrote maps, languages, entire cultures. They ruled from Vienna to Arabia. But they couldn't erase 18 women who scratched prayers into stone. Think about that. An empire with armies, cannons, endless resources, and the will to reshape the world, against women with nothing but fingernails and faith. And the women won. Not in the way empires measure victory. They didn't reclaim their convent, they didn't convert their captors, they didn't live to see freedom. But they left a mark. And 500 years later, we found it. Lux in tenebris lucet. The light shines in the darkness. Sister Magdalena carved those words knowing she would never leave that palace, knowing her name would be forgotten, knowing the world would move on without her. But she carved them anyway, because she understood something that empires never do. You can conquer land, you can rewrite history, you can erase names from ledgers and bury bodies in unmarked graves. But you cannot kill what people carry inside them, and you cannot silence what they carve into stone.